Hey guys, welcome to section 4 of this Django video tutorial. In this section we're going to be discussing creating the create game template view URL and form. So kind of a lot to digest there. For the create game you need a what's called a model form, which allows us to, just a form. I think we're going to end up having to make it just a regular form. But you need fields and you need data, and the names have to match up when we have the post event. And then in our view, we're going to create an event in the view that checks to see if it's post or get. But since there only be two methods available in our app, we should only have to deal with those two. So we can just do if it's post or get, we'll just kind of work from there. But in order to, obviously, in order for it to come through correctly, we have to make sure that all the fields are named particularly, and that everything comes through correctly so that the Django framework can go through and intelligently line up all of the data and create the records for us. So, kind of a lot to go over in this one. This one might run a little long, might be half hour, 45 minutes long, but we're going to go over a lot of important stuff, and it's going to be interesting. So, let's go ahead and get started. See where we left off here in Visual Studio. Oop. Let me switch over to my Solution Explorer because I can't see it with the overlay. All right, here we are. This is the index.html that we just built. So what are the steps for creating a new view in Django? Well, there's a few places we can start. We can start with the views file, we can start with the URL file, or we can start with the what do you call it? the forms, if it has a form. So in this case, we're going to go ahead and start with the form because the form makes the most amount of sense, in my opinion. And we're going to create a custom implementation here that allows us to give a list of scores from the form post event, and then it's going to generate those scores so that it assigns it to them in a database. So this will make a little bit more sense as we continue going onward. So let's go into forms.py. Let's come in here and create our form class, create game form. And this will implement forms.form, I believe is the correct implementation. Looks good. And then we'll have this thing called class meta, which defines some of the fields that we need. The model equals game. Model equals game, and we need to import that. Models import game score, because we're going to need that. Model equals game, and then fields. We got to name our field according to what we're going to be reading on the other end. So fields have to kind of be, it has to be basically a list of like what we're gonna post to the server, right? So we can read it properly and interpret it correctly. So fields equals, this is an array, so we're gonna go, we'll just start with the name fields for the game. So we'll go name, date, number of teams, and then each one has a name, right? So each team has a name. And we said they're going to be up to 5. So we're creating this all custom so that we can submit custom form data and have it be processed by Python on the back end and create relational data alongside the game, because we're not just creating a singular model, we have to create the scores that are associated with that model. So team 1 name, team 2 name. In fact, let's go ahead and shorten it up here a little bit, like so. Team 3, team 4, and finally team 5, right? Because we're going to have up to 5 teams. Make sense? All right, now let's do the scores because each team has a score. So we'll do team 1 score. Oops, score. We'll go ahead and scroll over here so we can see. As such, team 2, team 3, team 4, and of course, team 5. There you go. So now we got all our fields. Now what are we going to do with these fields? So what we're going to do is we're going to create some methods that we can then implement when we get the post event from our form. What I mean is we're going to grab the current class and give a game and give some scores and then associate the scores with that game. So let's start with def. We're going to create a method in here, get game. And this is going to implement self. Self is just what allows us to reference the existing Python object. Typically it has to be called in Python classes. So game equals game. Just generate a new game here. And then game.name equals self.data. Name game.date equals self.data. Date game dot what else? Number of teams. Visual Studio trying to help me out there. Oh my goodness, what have I done? Teams equals self.data number of teams as such. Okay, cool. So this is how we're going to get the game object from the form when it's submitted. Because this is going to be in Python, assuming we keep all the form fields consistent with these naming conventions. We're going to be able to make sure that all this stuff comes through on the post event. I'll show you what I mean in a little bit. We'll go ahead and create another method. This method is going to be a little more complex because we need a method that gets us the list of scores. So, the scores have a team name and a score that the person was able to get. So, what does that look like? So, come over here. Oh, my bad, I'm all over the place here. So, def get scores self, and we'll go ahead and we'll generate each score individually. So we need score 1 and score 2 because remember there's a minimum of 2 scores on each game because there's a minimum of 2 teams on each game because we're talking about competitive games that you have to keep score for. So let's declare score 1 equals score 1 dot name equals self dot data team 1 name, right? Team 1 name, and then score 2 dot score equals self dot data team 2 name. And I'm going to show you guys a little life hack that I like to use here. Score 1 dot score. I'm going to show you guys a little life hack that I like to use here. Let's bring up a notepad. And let's go through here. And because everything's coordinated by the number, we can do a quick find and replace here. We can go Control H1, replace with 2, replace all. Oh, jeez. Replace with 2, replace all. And I just found an error. This is so bad. I need to get my life together before I start teaching people life hacks. Okay, let's try this again. So now that looks good. So we can Control H, replace 1 with 2, replace 1 with 2. What that does is that takes everything here and just, whoops, just boom. Now it's going with the team 2 score and such and so forth. So that looks great, right? Yeah, that looks amazing. And then we can see if there are additional scores that need to be taken. So, so we can do a couple of conditional checks. We could write something like this. If self.data number of teams greater than 2, and we'll do the same thing on Notepad. Control H, 2 replace with 3, replace all, and 2 replace with 3, replace all. When I have these sorts of things to work on, these sorts of like kind of repetitive but with slight variations in the name of properties, I always like to use Notepad to real quickly do a find and replace. Very handy. Very good tip there. So, looking good, looking real good. So let's do that for the next iteration of scores here. The next one is going to be if it's greater than 3. Okay, if it's greater than 3, we need to grab score 4. So 3 replace with 4. As such, replace all. And 3 replace with 4. Replace all. So now we have all this here. As such, that looks great, right? Last, if self.data number of teams greater than 4. Whoops, I forgot my colon. Sorry, everybody. We'll do the same thing. We'll go Control H, 4, replace with 5, replace all. And then FOUR, replace with FIVE, replace all. As such, isn't that great? Look at how fantastic that is. Oh, wonderful, wonderful. Looks good, looks really good. I'm pretty comfortable with that, but we do need to return a list, right? Because this has to return a list of scores. So we need to append and create a list. So we'll create our list, score list equals this. That creates a list for us, score list.append, score 1, score list.append, score 2. We'll do the same thing with each of these. Score 3, score 4, oops, and finally score 5. Isn't that fantastic? Some nice pretty little code we've made here. So I really like the way that that looks. So let's go ahead and come down here and let's go return the score list as such. Because now that we're done getting all this from the form, which has been submitted, we can return it. We can return it. And I'm going to show you exactly what that means in a second here. So let's go into our views.py. And let's go and let's create the create game method. So we'll go def create game. Oh, and let's also add the login required too. I gotta find that as well, because you shouldn't be able to create a game unless you're logged in, right? So what are we looking at here? Where's the login required? Where does that come from? What framework? First off, .forms, import, create game form, and then from Django django.contrib.auth.decorators. Import login required. So what this is we're going to put this over here and go like that and add a decorator. Now you have to be logged in to access Create Game. You can't do it from an anonymous connection. So that's pretty good right there. Now let's create the logic that's going to allow us to actually create the game. Now what this looks like is the first thing we're going to do is we're going to go if request.method equals post. Now what this does is it does exactly what it says it is. If the user is posting via a form, we want to know and we want to grab the information. So if request.method equals post, we create a new instance of the form. So form equals create game form request.post, all capitals as such. And what this does is this creates our form and it grabs it and gets it into memory so we can start accessing the methods and properties that exist on the form. So what can we do from here? Well, first of all, let's check if form.isValid, because that's important. We can extend the form with requirements to determine whether or not the data was valid. Let's go game equals form.getGame, and scores equals form.getScores as such. That looks great. So now we need to assign it to the user info. So remember, the user info class is this model over here we created that is associated with the user but is not itself a user. The problem is we don't create one of these when the person registers. So in order to ensure that it'll work in this particular situation, once they create their first game, we'll create the user info class. So I'll show you what I mean. We'll do a try because game user info equals user info dot objects dot get user ID equals request dot user dot ID. So let me explain to you what this is doing. We're getting the user ID from the request of the current user ID in the user info database. So let's bring up our database again real quick. We can see that the user info contains the user ID as one of its parameters. So we can see that we can search this, and we can also get the currently logged in user ID from this request.userid. So this will get us the user info from this query. The problem is if it doesn't exist, it throws an error, hence the try except. So except user info equals user info as such. User info dot user equals we'll do request dot user user info dot save game dot game user info equals user info. So let me explain to you what these 4 lines of code are doing. First, we're creating a new user info class. We're assigning the currently logged in user to that user info class. Then we're saving it, which saves it to the database. And then we're taking the game object that we just created and assigning the game user info to the newly created user info class. That's what we're doing. So really, in a nutshell, all this is doing is associating it with the currently logged in user using our user info class. That's it. Next, let's go game.save. Now we need to save our scores. Remember, scores reference game, so we save game before we save scores. For score in scores. This is our little for loop. Score.game equals game and score.save. Now what's that doing? We're taking all the scores that we submitted, associating with that game object, and then saving each one to the database. So this gets the game and associates it with this game, and then this saves. Pretty simple. And then finally, we're going to create a new games object and redirect to the home page. So games equals game.objects.filter game user info ID equals request.user.id, and then return redirect dash and remember, this is our context object, so we have to pass that in like so, and that's it. But before we're done, we need to come out of this if block, and if it is not a current post request, we'll go ahead and we'll just render the view just by default. We'll just render it normally. So return render request app/create game.html, which will be the name of our template that we build. And then we'll pass in the context here. And we'll go form, oops, sorry about that, form. Like that. Now it's great. Oh, it's really good. So now that we have the view in here, we'll go ahead and register it in our urls.py. We'll go down here and we'll say, how do we want to call this? We don't need any parameters, so we can just register it as normal. Create game, and we'll go views.createGame. And that grabs all that stuff from the create game, which calls our form, which displays it and does everything we need to do. The only step left to do in this case is the templates. That's the only thing we have left to do, is create the actual template.html. We can test it out and make sure that it's going pretty well. So I'm going to hop off here real quick, take a quick break, and then we will continue with this section. Hey guys, I'm back. Sorry about the interruption. I had to deal with a family situation. So we are at the create game step here in our Scorekeeper app, and where we left off, we're creating the template next. So that goes in our template/app folder, or we could also create custom templates and custom folders in this, depending on what all we want to have in here. Really, the sky is the limit. We can add as many folders and as much stuff as we want, depending on what all we're building. So now that we have the URL built, the form built, and the views.python file filled up with what we need in order to process the request, let's go ahead and create the form. So what we're going to do is we're going to go add new item, and we're going to go, we need the HTML. Where is it? Where is it? Oh, here it is. Create game. And this is going to get our creategame.html file. In similar manner to the other apps, we're going to use the extend app layout here and the block content as such. And the reason for that is because we want to keep our sidebar, our header, everything else that the app already has, so that it looks pretty uniform across all devices and all pages. And then we're going to go ahead and we're going to create the form here. Well, we'll start with maybe a header and then we'll create the form. So we'll start with a row in Bootstrap, and we'll create our header. And we'll create an HR class, which is like a separator, HR element here, which serves as kind of like a separator, which are nice for things like forms and whatnot. And then within our row, we are going to have a form, some rows, some columns, and a couple of other things. And then I'm going to create it in HTML and CSS, and I'll show you how to do that. But there are ways, of course, of using Python to create custom forms. The problem becomes that when you work with this stuff, sometimes Python doesn't have the functionality you need out of the box. So you have to improvise a little bit if you go that route, and you have to make sure you're writing really good, clean Python code on the back end so that it looks great on the front end. I prefer to just mess with the HTML and CSS myself, but everybody is free to make that choice. That's all. It's all good. So for this div class equals row, we'll make a full width column. And we'll put our form in it. So form method equals post action equals, we'll go create game as such, and we'll open up our form here. So you can see that this is the form that it's posting to this. In the previous section of this video, we went ahead and we added our create game functionality, which we can go into the views.python file, and we can see that if it's post, it's going to do all this stuff. It's going to get the scores, get the games, and save it all to the database. So we have the form method post and the create game. So now what do we need? Well, to clarify what I meant when I said that the rows have to sorry, not the rows, that the that the fields have to match up when we're posting the form. What I mean when I say fields is I mean all of this stuff. I mean all of this stuff. Because of course there's a typo in there. It should be fields, not field, I believe. But let me double check real quick and see. I think it's fields. I don't think it's field. I think it's fields. So anyways, we'll go with it. We'll roll with it and just kind of keep it moving. So back to our create game. We've got this form here inside a row, which is inside a colMD12. We can split our colMD12s, which is a full width column, into half width columns within that existing column. You can have columns within columns and whatever you want to do, but it can sometimes disturb the hierarchy if you have too many columns within too many columns. So we're going to try and keep it relatively simple. But one of the things that we need at the top of this is what's called a Csrf token, which is cross-site request something, which is something for security reasons that Django has built into it. The Csrf token is going to make the cross-site requests not a possibility. So you can't cross-site request this. You can only request to this particular form. It creates like a unique key for each form submission that it expects it on the receiving end or it shows us an error. That's typically required in Django. So the Csrf token gives us an added layer of security. And then let's go through this form and let's create our fields. So to recap, the fields we need are all right here. So we basically need up to 5 teams. Each team has a name and a score, and then we need a name, date, and number of teams. So total, that's around 13 fields, give or take, depending on how many teams we have. We're going to add some JavaScript to toggle the view of the fields. You can do the same stuff in React, but we're not going to extend this out with React in this particular lesson because that's it's a little more advanced when you start adding all those additional layers on there. We're just going to use native JavaScript for this tutorial. But anyways, let's go ahead and start creating some of these fields. So div class equals col MD6 and div class col MD6 as such. So that is going to split it in half. So we're now looking at 2 side-by-sides. And each one is going to contain a couple of fields. And then we'll create our labels here. So label 4 equals ID underscore name. We'll say game name. That's our label. And then let I want to make sure these fields all line up properly. So we put our labels, and then we're going to put our input next to it. So we'll have input type equals text, name equals name, require equals such and so forth, ID equals ID underscore name, and then class equals form control. And there we go. So that's a good template we can work off of for the text inputs. You know, because you're going to have we're going to have to use this a couple of times. We're going to have to modify it each time. So to recap, we need a text input for the name, we need a date input for the date, and we need an integer input for the number of teams. So this one will make number of teams. Number of teams. Number of teams. This. And I think instead of text, we have to do number here. So we'll go number. And then this is very important. Name is what actually gets from the form. ID is for your purposes, for selecting this within the document object model. But when it posts to the database, it's going to look for this name field. So if name is number of teams, it's going to map that to the fields within the form, and it's going to do it properly. And then game date. So we'll do game date, and we'll do ID date. Did we call it date? I think we called it date. Okay, yeah, I'm pretty sure we called it date. Name equals date. Yep. Yeah, that looks really good. That looks really, really good. Because we're going to have to get a little fancy here and work with some, work with some custom posting events on the back end. But anyways, as I was saying, let's go ahead and continue. So now that we have those three fields, let's start with the 10 fields that are assigned to each one. So we'll do div class equals call MD6. And we'll do another div class equals call MD6. Like so. Check that out. It's great, right? We can take the same template here, which is game name, and we can put this down here, and we can modify it for team one name, right? So let's go team one name, and then the ID is going to match the same pattern. Team one name, like so. And it is required. It is required because, I mean, you have to have at least one team, and a team has to have a name, right? So team one name. Ta-da! Now we're going to use the cool little trick. Do you guys remember the trick? We're going to use the find and replace in our handy dandy notepad editor. Remember, we did that with some of our Python code over here. We do it with our HTML, CSS now. We'll go Control H, we'll replace 1 with 2. Replace all. 1 with 2. Replace all. Control A, Control C. For those who didn't see what I just did, I took it into the notepad and I just replaced 1 with 2. That's all I did. So if we copy and paste this in here, just below team 1, check it out. There's team 2 name. Beautiful, right? And then we'll do the same thing for team 3. So let's come back over here, Control H, 2, 3, or replace all, and then 2, 3, replace all, Control A, Control C, and Control V. It's all about working smarter, not harder. A little shortcuts like this will go a long way to help you guys out. So let's go ahead and Control H. We'll do 3 with 4. Replace all. 4. Control C. Control V. And then we'll do that as well with 5. So we'll control, oops, sorry, cancel. We'll do 4 with 5, replace all, 4, 5, replace all, Control A, Control C, Control V. Looks good. All right, so that's that. That's that section. Now we have these, all of these have the corresponding IDs, corresponding names. We're going to add the required attribute to them if they are visible. If. But before we can do that, we have to add a little bit of custom CSS here. So we're going to do that in just 1 second. But first we're going to create the scores next. So the score is a number. So it'll be pretty similar to this. We can even just copy paste here. Control C, team 1, SCORE. Team 1, like so. We'll make it a number. And we didn't add a value. We need to add a min and max to the number of teams too. Value equals 2. Min equals 2. Max equals 5. There we go. That resolves that. I don't want people sitting 10 teams, 100 teams. No, 5 teams tops. That's what we made in our project statement there. So team 1 score. Make sure all this stuff lines up in case we have to do some sort of document object selection, you know, toggling things and making things look nice. And then let's go ahead and let's do the same little trick. Again, it's all about working smart, not working hard. We'll paste this in here, and we'll do 1 switch to 2 because everything is the same except for that. And we'll do the capital 1 switch to 2 as well. Beautiful. So we'll Control C and Control V. Like so. Team 2 score. So there you have it. Team 3, Team 4, Team 5 next. Again, since we're repeating ourselves, just Control H, take 2 and turn it to 3, replace all, and then 2 and turn it to 3, replace all. Control A, Control C, Control V. That looks good. Same thing for 4. Control H. We'll take 3 and turn it to 4, replace all. And we'll take capital 3 and turn it to 4. Replace all. Control A, Control C, Control V. One more time for number 5. Control H. 4. Replace with 5. Replace all. Excuse me. 4. Replace with 5. Replace all. C. And there we go. That's all our fields. So let's just take a quick look down here and double check and make sure everything here looks correctly. Everything here looks great. The only issue that I have is we need to add some classes to these so that we can have them show up or not show up. Let me see. Or we could just toggle. We could toggle the. Trying to think. Do I want to hide them, or do I want to toggle the ability to enter? I think I like hiding them better. So for both the label and for the text, we're going to add the class equals team 3 to this. And I should have done this before doing our little find and replace. But anything associated with team 3 is going to have the class team 3. Anything associated with team 4 is going to have the class team 4. And anything associated with team 5 is going to have the class team 5, team-5, just like that. And that includes both the input and the label. Team 4, team 3, team 5, team 4, team 3, like so. That looks great. And the reason why is because we're going to actually hide these when we don't have more than 2 teams. By default, we'll have 2 teams. When a person, kind of decides what they want, we'll go ahead and we'll create more. We'll display the additional fields. Finally, we need a submit button. So we'll go button type equals submit. And we also want to add a class to that too. Class equals button large. We'll go button success. That's a good one. Create game. Beautiful. So that looks really good. I'm pretty satisfied with that. But now we need to add some JavaScript and some CSS to make it work really nicely. Because right now, just the regular, CSS is not going to do it. So what we got to do is, remember those classes that I just created? Well, we have to go through and we have to create implementations for how do I want to explain this? We have to add CSS classes so that we can be like, okay, this is not going to display. So we'll go team 3 display none. Team 4 display none. Team 5 display none. There we go. So that should make them hide by default because we added all those classes to those things. All right, what's next? Well, we got to go into the scripts. We got to add some custom code to make it so that it toggles. So I believe I've created a scripts.js file here. Oh, no, it looks like I haven't. So you want to create, in most apps, you want to create your custom scripts here because you'll have a lot of default scripts, and then you want to create one of your own for your own custom scripts because usually you're extending existing stuff, so you need a place for your own stuff, as well as stuff that's been kind of given to you, by frameworks and tools and libraries and that sort of thing. So let's go add. Let's go new item, and we'll just call it scripts.js because I think that's a great name for a script file. And then into layout, we can reference this. So if we go to layout, we can copy this, but we'll just do scripts.js, and now we have something we can reference for our own sake. So what are we going to add to this? We're going to add our custom toggling teams function. We're going to declare a function. So const toggle teams, like so. What's the parsing error? I'll just declare it the old school way. Okay, likes that better. Do it the old school way. So var ln equals we'll call it team num equals, we'll do let, just so we're, let team num equals document.get element by ID. We're going to pass in the following ID. ID underscore number of teams. Semicolon. You remember when we were over here in the create game.html, you can see that the ID number of teams is right here. Well, sorry, it's right over here actually. So if we get the value using this query selector, it's going to give us whatever the value is. So 2 to 5 will be the range. So we need some conditional logic that's going to toggle everything. And this is going to be a series of block statements. They're going to use a document.query selector to adjust the display style of each of these elements. And this will make sense more in a second. So we'll go if team num equals, whoops, I'm in Python still. Team num equals 3. And I believe this is actually going to be a string. Like that. So document.query selector all. And we're going to pass in the following team 3 for each L Okay, so let me explain to you guys what I just did. This query selector all gets every class that has team 3 in it. This for each of those classes executes this function on that element EL. Make sense? So whatever we pass into this function, it executes it on all of those. And we need a query selector for each one. So we'll do one for team 4 and one for team 5, like so. Make sense? All right, let's keep going. L.style.display equals block L dot, is it required? What is it? Is it required equals true? No, that looks good. So this is saying that if team num is 3, we display team 3, like so. And then we'll have something similar for each of these. But the key difference here is we're going to make required false so that we don't get form validation errors when we try to submit. And we're also going to make it none, like so. Like that. Make sense? So let me explain to you what this is doing. If team num is 3, we're using the query select all to get every class, iterate over each of them, and in this case, team is 3, so we're displaying the team 3, we're not displaying team 4 or team 5. And then you guys can imagine how this is going to continue, because immediately after this, we're going to say else if team num equals 4. Guess what we're going to do here? Boom. We'll take all this stuff, paste it down in here, and we will display all the way up to team 4. Make sense? And then we'll do it again. Team num equals, and that's the strict equals 5. So we're comparing case before preparing value. Document.query selector, block, because if the teams are equal to 5, all 5 teams should be displayed. Finally, if we don't make it into any of these cases, don't display anything. Oh, and we need to make this true also. Don't display any of these. have a scenario for each of these, and it looks fantastic. It looks wonderful. So there you have it. That's using the query selector in jQuery, or sorry, not jQuery, JavaScript, ES6, which has essentially replaced jQuery at this point, to toggle the display of our team forms, depending on how many teams we have. So now, what we can do is we can add an event handler, or yeah, I believe it's called an event handler, to the create game HTML form. We go over here, let's see, number of teams, and we can say onChange equals toggle teams, like so. You see that? And what this will do is this will allow us to toggle it, so we can see that it is in fact toggling each time. So let's go ahead and run it and see what that looks like. I don't know if it's going to work. I might have an issue here. But let's go ahead and bring over the app. So here it is. So create game. See, it's not working. It's not working. First of all, it's not aligning correctly, so we need to fix that. I have some ideas about how we can do that. So we're not aligned properly. So I think what we need to do, let's just get rid of this colMD12 completely. And let's close out this, close out this row up here. And let's break apart the form into rows. Yeah. So that we can have some separation here. So this will help with separating our classes, because it doesn't make much sense to have the rows be set up so that they overlap and they look sloppy and bad. So why don't we try a structure kind of like that, where we have the two rows with the columns. And now let's refresh, and I'll bring my screen over here. You can see, okay, so that's already looking a little better. Yeah, agreed. Doesn't look quite as crappy. But there's a problem. These are displaying. And remember, in the CSS, we adjusted it so that it shouldn't display. But let's see if our JavaScript is working at least. No, it's not. Something is wrong here. So I don't know what's going on. So we gotta look under the hood and figure out what in the hell's going on here. So we've got scripts.js, we have site.css. Let's see, do we have that? Okay, so here's the problem. Here's the problem, guys. This is a very common problem. Google Chrome is not loading the latest. So trying to find disable cache while DevTools is open. Okay, so DevTools is open now. So let's see if now that I opened it. Okay, no, it's still broken. Okay, no, now it's not broken, but now I think it's my issue, because I don't think it's I don't think it's cached. So let's see, team. Yep, here's an error here. .team5. Okay, let's go ahead and refresh. There we go. Now it is kind of working, but kind of not. Something's going on with this. Let's go inspect, and let's bring her over here. So if we go to our console, we can see all the sources in here. And if you're using something fancier like React, you won't see all of this. But let's just see what we get. All right, let's see what we get when we create breakpoint and we try to do the onChange. So boom. All right, now we're in this breakpoint. So let's start toggling through it. All right, what did team num turn out to be? Oh, I see. So we didn't get the value. That's the problem. We need to get the value of team num. That will fix this whole thing. So how do we get the value of team num? I'm pretty sure we just use .value. Pretty sure we go into that and just use dot value. So at the end of this, boop, like so. All right, let's go ahead and give her a refresh, and let's see if this works now. Okay, I like it. I like it. Okay, I like it. Okay, I also like it. We're looking real good. We're looking real good. So let's test our first form submission. We'll do my game date, we'll make it today. And we'll just do a bunch of gibberish here. We'll go create game. And let's see. Ooh, interesting error we got here, guys. Check it out. Oh, yeah. Check it out. So we're in our scores method where we're converting all the scores from our post event to, and you can see here's everything that gets submitted. Score 1 is what we typed in, score 2 is what we typed in. And we're getting this error, which is the greater than is not supported between types of int and in types of string and int. The reason why is this data dictionary contains nothing but strings. So, real easy fix for that. We're going to go str, like so. We're going to stringify it. All right. We're going to stringify. Oh, wait, no, sorry. Sorry, we're going to intify it. Ha ha. Intify it. I don't think that's a name or a word or whatever. We're going to try it like this. And Python's absolutely right. You can't compare strings and ints because strings are a series of characters and ints are a value type. So, or not a value type. They're both value types, but ints are, I don't know what the word is. But anyways, let's keep it moving. Keep it moving, keep it moving. We'll set a breakpoint on the post so we can kind of see how it shakes out. You know what I mean? We'll go to the game.save and score.save. We'll go to those as our breakpoint. Let's go and create game, so on and so forth. We'll make it 3 people. Create game. None type has no attribute game user info. Huh. Interesting. So for whatever reason, our form is returning no game. I wonder why that could be. Oh, because we never returned anything, obviously. Return game. Yeah, could be a problem. Could be a problem, folks. We don't want to do that. We want to make sure we create something and we return something. But you always realize these mistakes after you've already made them and gone back and looked at how stupid you were and been like, oh, why could I be that stupid? Okay, here we are. So let's see what the game looks like, ladies and gentlemen. The game looks great. It looks amazing. So it matches the name. Let's check. I'm going to check over here in my IDE. The date is correct. The user info looks correct. No. Number of teams correct. That looks great. And now let's save each of the scores. So the scores look correct. Yep. Fantastic. Oh, but we did get one final error. Check it out. Name redirect is not defined. pretty easy one to fix, actually. So let's just go up here, import render, comma redirect. We're going to try it one more time. Third time is the charm. I do have to get going soon, so let's go create. Try again. We'll make it today. Create. Looks good, looks good, looks good. And now we're back home and we can see a list of our games. Fantastic. So we're now creating games, associating them with scores, and we are putting them in the database and displaying them to the user when they are logged in. Fantastic. Thank you guys so much for joining me on this video, and I'll see you in the next one.